All right, welcome to the first installment of the Sixers Fastbreak Podcast, brought to you by Philly Sports Report. I am Nate, and then these are my co-hosts.
I'm Evan. I've been working with Philly Sports Reports since March 2023. I'm excited for our first episode.
I'm Ethan. I've been with Philly Sports Reports for I think just about a year now, and I'm really excited to get this podcast going with you guys.
Oh, welcome, gentlemen. It's crazy that this season's already upon us. I feel each year the offseason gets shorter and shorter. This offseason was very eventful. Of course, with the signing of Paul George, we have Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond comes back. Just overall, what was your reactions to the Paul George signing earlier in the summer?
I think Paul George, I think it's going to be big for us just because, you know, Maxey and Embiid aren't just like reliant on each other all the time. You can give guys a break and you have a third option now, whether that's Maxey or George, probably going to be George. But yeah, I think I have it down. It's 4 years, $211 million. So that's a lot of money for a guy who's like 33 about Paul George.
Mhm.
But I think we're we're in a win now mentality now. It's not a build for the future. It's we want to win now. So we'll get what we need to get, and we'll execute with the guys that we have. So I think the Paul George signing is a great way to try and get a championship.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Evan. I remember staying up till it was like 1 or 2 in the morning when he ended up getting signed, because you remember hearing that report where it's like they're having a meeting in LA, and it's like I want to go to sleep, but at the same time this could happen tonight, so I can't miss this if it does. But that was a very fun night. I remember trying to convince people to like, don't make me do this by myself. I don't want to just be on my phone until 3 in the morning. But, I really like it. I think it adds a lot of, like you said, it's that third star that you see a lot. I mean, you're starting to see in the NBA kind of more of a two big stars and then that, or a big star and then like, you got Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, kind of that kind of thing. And then Michael Porter from there, from the Nuggets, who built a nice championship squad. And we're trying to get right up there with him. It's a move where obviously we're not really paying for Paul George for what he's going to be in that like fourth year of that contract. That's a little bit of a iffy situation there. We're paying for him for these first 2, maybe 3 years, because we're trying to get ourselves over the Celtics, who are coming off a championship, the Knicks, who've had a wild offseason of their own. And I think it's a great move to do that. I think it was the best move available for, what was there.
Yeah, by far, I agree that was the best move on the table, and I think you're right to say we're signing him for this first year or two. I think it's very unlikely he plays out this contract just because, the team might go in a different direction. We might be required to because Embiid might have issues or Maxey might have issues or whatever may happen. I do think you brought up a good point in the sense that the championship dynamic, it went from big threes win or like super teams win, but to now like you have one big star and then you have a bunch of guys that kind of follow under them. And that's kind of a debate I had in the offseason is like, what do we do with this cap space? Do we get a bunch of, middle tier guys for $10 million a year contracts, or do you go out and try to get a guy like Paul George? And now I was of the opinion that you go build up your bench because that's always been a problem for us, and you kind of just rely on Maxey and Embiid to kind of do all the heavy lifting. But, I think how it's shaped up, we still got a lot of great bench pieces. You got Martin and Drummond, who I think are going to be incredible for this team, especially Drummond. That's always been one of the biggest issues with this team.
I mean, I remember those Paul Reed. Like, I love Paul Reed, but he became very hard to watch towards those later games in the season, especially when, you remember when Embiid got injured, obviously, you're starting Mo Bamba, and that just can't happen.
Yeah. No, Reed was always a questionable player for me because he seemed always very uncoordinated and he always looked out of place. So, but Drummond,
man's in Detroit.
he's back with Tobias.
God, I
think
I'd rather die. I think.
But I think Drummond, in his first stint with us, he showed that he kind of solved a lot of our problems. Like our problem was always, if we were one backup center away, right? And then you get Drummond, and it seems like he kind of solved all those problems. Then James Harden becomes available, and it's hard to leave him out of a James Harden trade. But it's good to have him back, clean up some of the stuff we have in the off Embiid minutes.
And
Yeah,
he solved an
definitely.
issue. Oh, sorry to cut you off there.
All good. But yeah, I think that you know, as you were saying, with you want to get a big star, you either get a star, you get a bunch of role players for cheap, and I think the Sixers we did both of that because we got Paul George, but we also signed Reggie Jackson, who's gonna be a good backup guard. We got obviously we drafted McCain and Adem Bona's looking good, especially off of um what he was doing in the summer league, and then signing Eric Gordon. I mean, we're getting depth. It's not like we're
Mhm.
not just getting Paul George and then that's it. So it's
Right.
Embiid, Maxey George, and then the rest of the lineup is terrible. We still have other guys who are good for depth, good bench guys. Someone gets hurt, they can jump in, and yeah. So I think that we got the best of both worlds of getting role players and getting depth while also adding a third star.
Right. And I
And
think
Kelly
that
Oubre is
was
still here too.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's something That's a question I want to pose because we got Kelly Oubre, who kind of was the fourth or fifth starter last year, and now we have Caleb Martin. So the question is, which one of them starts? Embiid, Maxey, George, and God, who else am I missing here? Those guys are all guaranteed starters, and then you have, I mean, I guess you could start them both, right?
Yeah.
Or
It's
Gordon.
just
Yeah,
Gordon.
Gordon's in there too.
So would you prioritize having just front loading your lineup or having the optionality to go to one of them coming off the bench?
I'd personally rather see. I love Kelly Oubre. I think I'd rather see him off the bench because his offense is pretty electric. We've seen that in games last year. The defense, I think could be more we were looking for there. And I think, to have Caleb Martin, a very well-rounded player, Eric Gordon, a very well-rounded player as your two starters there, and then Oubre, who can really fill in at either of those positions, more so small forward, but he can really get in there either way to, bring that offensive spark off the bench if we're in a rut or something like that. I think that's where he'd want to be, but it's really how Nick Nurse wants to play this team. It's a very different team, different and the same at the same time. And I think it's just however he wants this team to look, he can make it really because it's his team. It's however he wants to make this look, and that's going to be his decision. We'll probably see on opening night.
Yeah, I think that I agree. You probably put Oubre off the bench just because Gordon and Martin. I mean, Oubre can play both of their roles. So I mean, if something's going wrong or whatever, they're not playing well, you can just throw in Oubre. It's like he's coming off the bench, but he's still getting around the same minutes anyway. So it's not. So you basically have six starters, but obviously someone comes off the bench. I think Oubre would be nice in a six-man role.
Yeah, and it could become become a very matchup dependent decision. If you're looking to sort of keep up with a team like Boston or Denver, you might go with the Eric Gordon iteration and then have Oubre come off the bench just because you need to keep up with some of the scoring pace that those teams have. But if you need to go to a more defensive matchup, it might be better to take Gordon out and then have a bunch of wing defenders out there like George, Oubre, and Martin. And then I could also envision rotationally having Oubre and Drummond be the first substitution, taking Embiid and Gordon off, right? So you have Maxey,
Yeah.
George, Drummond. Oh my God, Maxey, George, Drummond, Oubre, and Martin out there, right?
Yeah. And Oubre is also nice because barring getting hit by a car last year, he was completely healthy. And God willing that doesn't happen again, he will be completely healthy this season. But who knows at this point? Philly's getting ever more dangerous, so I'm told. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the bigger concerns with this team with the addition of Paul George is the injuries. And it's been spoken about ad nauseum. But I mean, I think it is a true concern. Like, two of your three guys are notorious for being injured during the playoffs. It's just something that doesn't really make you comfortable.
Yeah,
And Maxey too. Maxey broke his foot a couple years ago as well.
he
So
did, yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, injuries are going to be. I think that's the main thing because on paper, I mean, this team looks. It looks like top three in the East. I mean, it's New York, Boston, and us. And
Okay.
and if you put any order, I think any
Mhm.
order. I mean, everyone wants to say Boston, but I think that Maxey, Embiid, and George, it's hard to stop that. So obviously Embiid's injuries. Maxey's obviously, I mean, he stayed healthy for the most part, but every year he's had a little bit of issues. But Paul George, obviously known for his injuries. I think that if we can stay healthy, then we'll be competitive in the East. We'll have over 50 wins and top two, top three seed. I just think that injuries are the biggest thing because if we're not healthy, we've seen what happens. I don't remember how many games, but it was like 10 and we were like 10 and 20 without Embiid, something like that,
Yeah.
like 33% win percentage in the games where we didn't have Embiid. It was awful. So it's like, oh, oh, it was awful. Wait for him to get back, but it was awful with having
There it
got
is.
kicked. Yeah,
My connection bugged out for a second.
yeah, all good. But
But
yeah, I think
yeah,
that
to the
just
point you
injuries
were
is the
making,
biggest
Evan,
thing.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that the expectation for the team? Obviously, in these past couple of years, it's been championship or bust. Just seeing how they stack up against the other teams in the East. You said it was Boston, Philly, and New York. Obviously, leaving out Milwaukee. So you don't think Milwaukee's that big of a threat to the other three, like the other power three teams in the East?
No, not really. I mean, Giannis, Embiid matches up with Giannis, and
Mhm.
you have what Chris Middleton, Dame, obviously. Um, I mean Dame. I mean Dame and Giannis is a problem, but I mean they weren't. They were overhyped going into last year, I think, and
Yeah.
they didn't really live up to that. So
Mhm.
it's like I don't see Milwaukee being the issue. I mean, you could see Cleveland obviously could be a problem with
Yeah.
Mitchell, Mobley, and all them, Garland. So I mean, but yeah, I think the Knicks and Boston's they're the biggest threats.
And even then with Milwaukee, I think they lived up to that hype for like what was it, 39 games with Adrian Griffin as their head coach, and then with
Yes,
Doc
yeah,
Rivers, they were just a bad basketball team. It's as simple as that. I think they had a losing record with Doc Rivers, with Damian Lillard, one of the best guards of the 2010s, obviously a little bit past his prime now, but Giannis, who's been one of the best players in the league for as long as I can remember. You know what I mean? I don't trust. Because if they had a losing record for the 40 or so games that Doc was coaching them, I don't know how I can trust them to go throughout an entire season and get
Mhm.
better from that. Because there's nothing that they really did over the off season that's going to
Right.
move me, that's going to, out talent their bad coaching.
Mhm.
So I think Cleveland's a threat too, but, they had so many problems with like just connectivity on the floor last year. I thought they were going to mix
Right.
up a lot in this offseason with,
Mhm.
Garland and Mobley, and that just didn't happen. So I don't know how
Yeah.
to even look at Cleveland.
No, I agree. And all of last season, it was how we were being told how much Donovan Mitchell hates Cleveland and how much he wants out of Cleveland. And I was fully expecting. I thought he was going to be the first big name moved in the offseason because it just seemed uh, like he was being tortured there. Uh,
Yeah.
but but who? So a lot of big moves for the Knicks and the Sixers. Celtics didn't really make any noteworthy moves, more just housekeeping stuff. But who do you think had a more impactful offseason, the Sixers or the Knicks? The Knicks got Cat and McCall, and the Sixers got George, Drummond, and Martin as their big signings.
Did the Knicks have much to work on? Like, to their credit, they've built a very good core there.
Mhm.
Also, Karl Anthony Towns, I don't know about you guys. That made no sense to me. I could
Yeah,
go on for a
yeah.
while about that. I remember I was driving home from, I think there was a football game at my high school that day. I looked down at my phone. I see Shams. I thought it was like one of those parody accounts or something like that. I'm like,
yeah.
there's no way this is real. And it's just makes no sense for either team to me. But
Mhm.
I'd give it to the Sixers, even though, like, I know the Knicks got McHale, which is a huge, they overpaid for him, but it is a huge signing and trade and all of that. That's going to do wonders for their starting five. But I think for the Sixers, this is, I don't want to say the biggest all in move in the process era because there have been plenty. But, I think the Sixers, to put it in the simplest terms I can think of, they got elevated more, and the Knicks just kind of became more well-rounded. I don't think it put them any higher because I still don't think it puts them over Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with New York, they getting Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, I just don't see how he fits. And losing DiVincenzo and Randall for Towns, I mean, you're losing depth, obviously. Well, you're losing two starters for one. And I mean, Towns is good, but I don't see him as I'd rather have Randall and DiVincenzo than have Towns. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And I mean the starting lineup of what Brunson, OG Anunoby, Hart, Bridges, and Karl Anthony Towns. It looks good on paper. I mean, I just feel like you said, elevated more. Like I think that the Knicks kind of stayed the same. Like maybe they got a little bit better, but the Sixers went from a team who I mean, it looks like right now we look better. Like we look a lot better. The Knicks, no one's really talking about how the Knicks will be so much better this year after having Karl Anthony Towns. Everyone's talking about the Sixers with Paul George are gonna be lethal. So I mean, yeah, I think like you said, elevating to a different level. I think the Sixers just took a jump from second round to Eastern Conference Finals, and I think the Knicks kind of stayed the same what they were last year.
I think we're having some connectivity issues with Nate over there. But to
Yeah.
build off the point you were saying, no, you mentioned second round. I mean, it has been talks to death. I mean, anytime anything, it's always this happened before Joel Embiid has made a conference finals. It's insufferable to have to live with. It's horrible. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I hate it.
Yeah, it's horrible.
This is really like, now you've had Jimmy Butler in the past, and obviously he left, not Embiid's fault, obviously. You've had James Harden in the past. James Harden is, he blew up in not Boston, in Brooklyn. He blew up here, and he's blowing up in Los Angeles. So he's going to have a very interesting legacy, which is a whole nother conversation. But now you've got Paul George coming over from Los Angeles, just teammates with Harden, obviously. Paul George, I don't want to say he's been there, but he's the most experienced player on this team. And, even for a guy like Jared McCain, he's going to have two really good mentors, and a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who's not a veteran by any means, but, he's been here and he's elevated himself as to one of the better guards in basketball. Paul George, who's been doing this since Jared McCain was probably like 6. So
Yeah.
I've got a lot of faith in how he's going to help develop that. And Jared McCain, I love. And we'll get to the draft later, obviously. Jared McCain, I think, is going to be really good for this team.
Yeah. I mean, Jared McCain having mentors like having George and having Maxey, and I think people are overlooking the signing of Eric Gordon and the signing of Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson's like 35, 36, veteran guard in the league,
Yeah.
knows his way, and Lowry too. Like having these guys who can mentor a young McCain who really can. I mean, we saw in the preseason game what he had 4 threes, something like that. Like
Yeah.
he's looking good. I mean, obviously it's against New Zealand, so it doesn't say anything. But it's like he was playing well in the summer league. We've seen what he could do at Duke. I think that having mentors, like you said, Maxey, George, and then Eric Gordon, Lowry, Reggie Jackson. I think that he could develop into a star for us down the line.
Yeah, his place in the rotation now is a little bit iffy just because I don't really know where, obviously garbage time you'll have him in there and he'll get minutes during the game, but he's obviously not really going to be prioritized too heavily because at the end of the day, they're focused about, winning the games, and developing the rookies is just going to end up coming second, unfortunately, for Jared McCain and Adam Bona. I also really like Adam Bona. I think he's going to be, because one of Drummond or Embiid, unfortunately, is probably going to go down for a little bit of time this year, if not both of them at one point. So Adam Bona, I think he's going to be a really nice depth piece, and there will probably be, a learning curve to come with that, especially with a lot of great centers, not just in the East, but throughout basketball now.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how he adapts to, NBA level play and all that. But I think just overall depth wise, I think we got arguably the most depth in the draft because, a lot of teams up front, they're picking for starters like Zachary Sachet and Alexander Sarr. I think in terms of depth at, guard, at now center as well, tremendous job from Daryl Morey in the front office.
Yeah, absolutely. But I did want to ask you about what are your thoughts on losing Batum? Because I mean, I think that if we kept Batum, like this would have been the perfect offseason. Obviously, with
Yeah.
salary cap and all that, you can't do that. But I think Batum is just his presence on the court is going to be missed, and obviously his veteran presence and just him on the court. The team, like Batum himself, doesn't do that much on the stat sheet, but just him as a player, as a locker room presence, he changes a team. So I want to know what your thoughts are on that, on losing him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you could tell there was a heavy amount of respect from the players to Batum, just seeing him on the court and all that. And, obviously can't forget the Batum game, if you will, and the play-in game against Miami. That was awesome.
Yes.
I don't really blame it on Daryl Morey. It felt like since he got here, he wanted to go back to LA. It's just where he likes to play. I mean, if you remember, his wife on Twitter was kind of really going off for a while, explaining why. I know this wasn't really Batum doesn't like Philly. It was more so it just works better for them. She explained that like the time of the James Harden trade, they had thought she might have had breast cancer, so they never really wanted to be here anyway. Ton of respect for Batum. He handled this very professionally. He didn't go after the team or hold out or anything like that. He just played through his season here, played very well for us for, a depth piece on the bench. And, he's going back to LA. We didn't really find the Batum replacement, essentially, which is more so what I think the goal should have been, because it didn't seem like he didn't like playing here. He's a Los Angeles guy, whether we like that or we don't. He loves playing there, and I think unless we really opened the bank for him, I think he was going back there no matter what happened.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it sucks to lose him, but I mean, it was inevitable.
Yeah.
This was a one and done thing with him. It wasn't going to be anything long term.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And to touch on another signing from the Olympics, I'm going to butcher this name, so sorry in advance, but Gershon
Yabusele.
Is that his?
Yabusele. I think it's
There
Yabusele.
it
I
is.
think. Don't mark my words on that.
Sounds
but I think.
French.
Yeah.
It sounds French. This is a very interesting signing.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what he did in the Olympics. Obviously known for dunking all over LeBron and making headlines
That's an
everywhere.
AI-generated image. AI-generated image. That's not real.
Okay. Well, allegedly he dunked on LeBron. But yeah, I mean, we saw what he did, obviously, against the New Zealand team in preseason. I think he had 15 points, didn't miss.
I think it was that, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was 6 for 6, I want to say.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, you can't ask for much more of a guy I don't think he's played in the league before, right? I think just overseas.
Think so.
Yeah.
Let me check that.
I mean, yeah, I think that I think he can be, because no one knows anything about him. So it's like, I think that just getting his, obviously, overseas experience, and it's not like he's Nate's back.
Yeah, that's
There he is.
my phone. All right.
Glad to have you back. We're talking about Gershon Yabusele, who also apparently did play for Boston at one point.
I could hear. Yeah, he was a mid-round pick or mid-first round pick for them, like 16, I think.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah. So apparently, like I was seeing, the Sixers were actually pursuing Gershon for like a couple of years. They were trying to get him for a year or two at this point. And they just wanted to see how he developed overseas before they pulled the trigger and signed him. So, I mean, he's an interesting signing.
He saw in the Olympics pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he did a pretty good job leading that French team. It's going to be interesting to see his role, because a guy like that who had a stint in the NBA and then went overseas and is coming back, like guys like that typically don't provide that much to an NBA team. So I'm going to be interested to see how much the leash Nurse gives him earlier in the year. Because I don't know, is he the 9th guy? Is he the 10th guy? It's kind of hard to say where he'd be at right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
Nurse
that
trusts his game.
yeah, he trusts his guys. I think that I mean, even if you put him in like the G League for the first week or so, just to see what he can do, I mean, I think that he could be something special. He also could be just a regular old forget the guy's name,
Hmm.
the random European guy's name. It could
Yeah.
be one of those guys. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think if I think we should put him in the G League just for a little bit. Not that he's not that he's not good enough for that, or not that he's too good for that. Just that he hasn't been in the league for a while. I think we
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
give him some time to get some playing time with the Blue Coats, and then bring him up if he's doing all right. But yeah, I think he could be something special.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think he'll
it's
really get in whenever the first like we're up by 20 or 30 in the fourth quarter. I think
Mhm.
that's when as soon as I'm imagining Nick Nurse has some kind of number in his head, as soon as we hit that lead, timeout, put in, McCain will probably get in there as well, put in Gershon, put in whoever, just to really see what he's got and just really let him run wild with that because
Hmm.
when we're up by 20, I don't think he's going to perform that poorly, that we will end up blowing that lead. I think, there's a lot of faith. But like you said, Evan, he could end up being really the steal of the off season, or he could just be the guy who dunked on LeBron. We'll have to say.
Mhm.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I mean, so you think Nurse has the option? Who do you think he's putting in first, McCain or Gershon?
I
Like,
could
who's higher
see
on
it as
the depth
both.
chart? Both.
I'd imagine it'd be McCain off the
Yeah,
start
same.
because, like you said,
Hmm.
Gershon could be a G League guy to start the
Hmm.
season. But I
I
honestly
mean,
could imagine it could be both. It just depends on the situation.
fair.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it'll be McCain just because I mean, you don't draft a guy close to the lottery if you're not
Yeah.
going to play him. So I mean, I would say that probably McCain. Yeah.
Mhm. All right. So who right now would be or should be the backup point guard? I know, Evan, you've mentioned Reggie Jackson a couple times as an underrated signing for them. So do you think Reggie Jackson should be getting the bulk of the backup PG minutes over Lowry, or should Lowry continue to have his backup role?
No, I think that Lowry is still the guy. I mean, we
Hmm.
saw him start. We saw him starting games, and he was holding his
Yeah.
own, and he was playing. It wasn't holding his own. He was playing well. So I
Right.
mean, you still got to go with Lowry, I think. But I mean, Lowry's what 38 years old, 39. So it's like if you need to put in Reggie Jackson, who's not that much younger, but I think that they're close. It's just I think Lowry has more, I guess, experience with the team. So
Hmm.
I would go with Lowry over Reggie Jackson. Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
really cool to
Lowry.
see a guy like Lowry, really loving this city. Like we saw him, I forget what game it was, but he like went on the scorers table or something like that. It's really cool to see a guy, his age. He's past his prime in Toronto. He was all right with Miami for a while, but it's really cool to see, a guy his age kind of have. I don't want to say a career revival, but something to that extent here in Philly, where it's like he can tell he just really loves playing here. I think he would have retired if he didn't, and the city loves having him because, like you said, he wasn't just holding his own out there. He was playing very well. He was giving us energy on both sides of the ball. Still got that 3-point shot, even if it's not what it used to be. But I think it'll end up being Lowry's solidified in there. I think he's going to be getting majority of those backup minutes. And then Reggie Jackson out of the gate will probably be that two guy. And he'll probably end up fighting with McCain throughout the season. And we'll just have to see who ends up winning that battle.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah, I
Reggie
think
Jackson.
we're. No, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
think Reggie Jackson's going to be very similar to how we played Campaign last year. I think he is Campaign's replacement.
Yeah.
Um, he might even be a little bit better than Payne, but yeah, I'd still definitely go with Lowry.
Yeah, I think we're squeezing the last little bit of NBA Lowry's got left in him, and I think just with that, he's already got that Nurse connection. I mean, that's what we talked about all
Yeah.
year. He played under Nick. He won a championship under Nick Nurse, so there's obviously a lot of trust, a lot of experience between those two. So I agree. I think Lowry's going to get the nod for the backup PG minutes early on in the season, and we'll probably maintain it unless I'd say McCain shows that he can hold his own back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So expectation-wise, what do you think their win total is going to be this year?
This is a tough question. It varies a lot depending on really just how ready Paul George is to go. Because last year they probably would have been a high 50s, maybe even low 60s team if Embiid didn't get injured. And that just, like Evan, you touched on earlier, it was like 10 and 20 or something atrocious like that in the 30 or so games that Embiid was out for. I'm saying the bare minimum around this team should be like 55-ish wins. I know that's a very high standard to be setting, but when you invest this much in a team, you have one of the, if not the best center in basketball and the best pure scoring center in basketball all of last year while he was healthy and the year before that. When you have Tyrese Maxey, who last year really broke out as one of the best guards in the league, Paul George, who has been one of the best guards in the league, there's no excuses. And there's injuries might happen. There's no excuses for that. Nick Nurse has got to find a way to work around it, and I trust that he will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that 55 number. I think that's a good over-under number. Obviously, I hope they go over, but it's really tough when you're in the same division. We got to play Boston and the Knicks 8 times. You got to play the Bucks. I think the Bucks we have 3 times this year. Got to play Miami 3 times, and then all the other West teams. So, 55 is a steep number, but if you want to contend, I think that's the minimum.
Yeah, it's the benchmark. On paper, like I said, this is one of the best teams in the league. So, yeah, 55 wins is probably where I'd say over/under is probably a good number. But it all comes down to injuries, and if we can stay healthy, then we're eclipsing that 55 win mark, possibly even 60 wins. One seed in the East. If Embiid didn't get hurt, he was the MVP, no questions. But obviously that didn't happen. So if we can stay healthy, yeah, I think this is a 60-win team. But the inevitable is going to happen. Someone's going to go down. So I'd probably say 50 to 55 is where we're going to end up, but 60 is where we should be getting.
And with the wins, it's not really about, like, kind of in the spirit of baseball, like we're in Philadelphia right now, for better or worse. In the spirit of that, like, once you make it, like, it's talked about in baseball all the time. Once you make it to October, anything can happen. We've seen that with, like, Philly's last 2 seasons, not this year. But with the Sixers, you kind of almost saw that last year where the team did not play well pretty much up until the last 2 weeks of the season. When Embiid came back, we beat the Thunder in a thriller. That was a great game and all that. Embiid was looking – he had dreads. It was amazing. The team was looking great. He was looking great. And, we got matched up in a Knicks series where a lot of people – I said that the Knicks just had a great season and we're going to get really unfortunate with seeding. I thought we were going to win in 6 or 7. But it's not really – I would sacrifice Paul George's entire season if it means we get him healthy in the playoffs. We just need these guys – if we can just get in as a 6, 7, hopefully not, but maybe 8 seed, and just have those guys ready, it'll be against Boston or New York or maybe Cleveland or even Orlando if they take another step forward this season. But with a fully healthy roster like that, I think we can. Boston's a tough one, but I think New York with a fully healthy roster in 7 games, I think we can beat them. I think Orlando we can beat. I think Cleveland we can beat, and Boston's just the big green question mark up in Massachusetts.
Would you? So you said you would trade Paul George's season for him to be healthy. So would you be okay with the Sixers load managing Embiid and George? Like maybe give them a game off every week, every 2 weeks.
Anything to keep them healthy, man, because you just need these guys for the playoffs. And I'll say this, during the season, I probably say I wouldn't like it, but the season hasn't started yet, and I'm a little bit more rational. I would take it.
We've gone through it where Embiid gets to game 50 and then gets hurt. And then it's like, in hindsight, maybe we should have sat him out this game against the Magic. So other than injuries, what are your main concerns for the Sixers? Is it, do you have questions with their defense? Do you have questions with their shooting ability? I mean, just anything game-wise that you are concerned that they may have not improved upon over last year?
Well, I mean, I think that, for the most part, we got better, but we don't really have a shooter. Like, we lost Buddy Hield, obviously, over the offseason. So, we don't have that knockdown guy. We don't have that sharpshooter anymore. And we've always had it in the past. We had, obviously, JJ Redick and Seth Curry,
Mhm.
and obviously now Buddy Hield before we lost him to Golden State. But yet we don't have that sharpshooter anymore. Jared McCain can develop into that, but it's too early to tell anything. But yeah, I think that shooting is probably the one thing that we kind of missed out on this offseason. But other than that, I thought we fixed our problems and got things where they need to be going.
I'm kind of with you there. I think, Embiid's a good shooter for a big. He's obviously never going to be like, Maxey, but that's not his expectation for a shooter. He's just going to bully guys in the paint and wherever else he needs to be. Maxey's a good shooter. Paul George, when he's on, is a good shooter. My concern is still more of kind of what it was last year. We've seen not just last year, but for the last 5, 6, 7 years, how this team has just collapsed in the playoffs in the non-Embiid minutes. And it wasn't only the playoffs last year, it was obviously also the regular season. And I saw a lot of talk in the offseason just on Twitter or whatever about how, even going back to the Toronto Raptors series, Tobias Harris was like a minus 60 something throughout that series. And he went, what was it, 0 for 9 in game 3 or 4, something like that.
Something like that.
I still think we have, to a lesser extent, that problem. I trust Drummond, but I don't know how much he's not going to be the Drummond that we had before. He's 5-ish years older, give or take a couple. McCain, it's always hard with draft picks, especially with the NBA, in my opinion. They can be such a wild card with that. McCain could really come on and be, I don't want to say rookie of the year, I'd sound cocky, but I think he could really, be one of the better players for this team, or he could be a slow developing guard. Mm-hmm. I trust Eric Gordon, but I don't trust him to lead the bench. I think he's going to be Eric Gordon, I don't think he's going to be, he's going to be good. That's what we got Eric Gordon for. And, Kyle Lowry, I think as for the bench, he's kind of one of the only guys that I trust to, when he comes on the court, he's not going to be Tyrese Maxey or Paul George, whoever he's filling in for at the moment, but he's going to be a very solid replacement for them. Everyone else for me is a bit of a question mark with, obviously stipulations within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you guys brought up a good point that we don't have a knockdown shooter. That's actually something I didn't really think about. Like, you look back at Sixers teams, all the way back to 2019, you had a guy like Mike Scott, and then you got a guy like Danny Green. You had the Reddicks, you had Seth Curry, and then last year you had Batum, who was a knockdown guy. And I feel like we are kind of missing that. I guess Gordon is supposed to be in that role, but I think that's something to keep a close eye on. I didn't really think about that. My main concern or worry personally, I know we talked about it, but was the backup guard. I don't know how much I trust either Reggie Jackson or Lowry. Lowry gets a year older. I don't know how comfortable I am with them commanding an offense. And maybe in the off Maxey minutes, you stagger it where George is out there alone and maybe he's commanding the offense or something like that. Or maybe you have Embiid George or something of that nature. So,
yeah, I'm right there with you. We're pushing 40 minutes now, but I did want to get in this before we wrap this up. Over the offseason, both Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, if I'm not mistaken, both received big extensions. This is, Daryl Morey and the whole Sixers ownership doubling down on this roster. I wanted to know what you guys thought about that. I'll give mine in just a minute, but big extensions, big moves. I want to know what you guys thought.
I can start. I think the Embiid one, or the Embiid extension, is more of a gratitude for how good he's been to this organization. And it's just, I think both sides want him to retire Sixers, so that's what this extension is saying. We're saying this. We're hoping this is your last contract in good terms. That this is your last big one, and then maybe you'll get a smaller one later on just to finish out your career. And then Maxey wise, I give Maxey a ton of props because he was supposed to get this extension last offseason. And Morey asked them to hold off so they could have the cap space available to have an offseason like this to get George and company. So big props to Maxey for holding out a year to get his extension.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to show that, I mean, while I said earlier that, I mean, it's a win now mentality, we still got these guys for a while. I mean, maybe Paul George doesn't live out his entire 4-year contract, but having Embiid for the next 3 years, yeah, Embiid for the next 3 years, and Maxey for a 5-year extension, which obviously he waited for, which helped us get Paul George. So I think that, yes, it's also it's helping to the win now mentality. It's helping us try to win the championship now, but it's also not completely ruining our future because we still have Embiid and Maxey and for the foreseeable future, 3 to 5 years. So yeah, I'm very happy with the extensions.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And these were moves where it's like, it's big news, but no one's really surprised. I mean, it's a really easy move for Daryl Morey to make for both Maxey and Embiid. And like I said, and like you said, Nate, ton of props to Maxey. I love it when you see like a player not holding out. He's going to bet on himself, and he earned himself far more money by doing that, by not making a deal over it. He just put his head down, went to work, won most improved player. And Embiid, like you said, that Embiid loves Philly, and most of the time, Philly loves Embiid. So it's always fun this time of the year when the sports start to, baseball season's starting to heat up. Sixers are coming back. Phillies are in the playoffs. Eagles are back. Flyers are coming back. And, you always know when it's that time of the year when it's 8 a.m. and you're in science class learning about whatever, and you look down at your phone and Embiid's just been paid $300 million, and you're like, oh, this is league-changing news, and I'm learning about conversions. But it's, always a very fun time of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, this is sort of the Goldilocks period of sports where everything's on right now. So
yeah. Is that all we got for today?
I think that's going to be a wrap on episode 1. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Sixers Fast Break. We'll probably get out another episode. What do we say? Like every week, once a week, we're doing these.
Hopefully.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're going to try to get one out once a week. Hope you guys follow along with us this season, and we look forward to it.